Hey there, this is Doug with Artfully Rogue. If you have purchased a YesWelder MIG-205DS, or you're thinking about it, then I'm going to show you how to get it set up right out of the box, and then I'm going to show you how to dial in the settings so you can start welding.
When you open your box and lay out your parts, you should have a welding unit, a ground cable, your MIG gun, your gas line, your 110 to 220 adapter, your stick welder line, and your instruction manual with some Teflon tape and a drive wheel. A few tools you'll need to complete your setup include a couple adjustable wrenches or open-end wrenches and some wire cutters. First, hook up your ground cable. Simply insert the male side of the ground cable into the female side of the welding unit. Give it a turn until it locks into place. Next, remove the protective covering where your MIG gun will go, and remove the protective covering on your MIG gun. You'll want to line up your MIG gun into the machine. Big hole on the bottom, 3 small holes on the top. Turn clockwise to tighten the MIG cable into the machine. Okay, next, we're going to hook up the gas line to the back of the machine. Simply insert the male side of the fitting of the gas line into the female fitting on the back of the machine. Finger tighten, at which point you'll want to use a wrench for the nut on the back of the machine and tighten the gas line so that it's snug. Be careful not to over tighten so you don't damage the fitting. Next, connect the other side of your gas line to the gas regulator on your tank of shielding gas. Thread the gas line fitting by hand until tight. Then, use your adjustable wrench to snug the connection. Again, be careful not to over tighten as to not damage the fittings. With regards to type of shielding gas, you can either use a 75-25 mix of CO2 and argon or straight CO2. The 205DS is set up to handle either shielding gas. So next we're going to load the MIG wire. Your MIG wire is something you'll do on a more frequent basis, as this is one of your consumables. In order to load the MIG wire, turn the welding unit so you can access the side of the machine with the drop-down door. Open the side door and let it rest on your work surface. Remove the spool cover by turning the nut counterclockwise. Be careful not to lose the spring and remove the spool alignment plate. Place the nut, the spring, and the spool alignment plate on top of the machine so you can access them easily. Place the spool of MIG wire inside the welding unit and onto the spool alignment plate at the back of the welding unit. Make sure that the wire direction will unwind off the spool at the bottom of the welding unit. Holding the spool in place, place the spool alignment plate that you removed earlier back into position, replace the spring and the nut onto the axis bolt, and then tighten by hand until everything is nice and snug. Before we remove the wire from the spool, we want to release the tension knob, which will allow the tension wheel to spring out of place. Once we remove the wire from the spool, make sure you keep tension on the wire, because if you don't, you will have one heck of a mess. Once you have the wire clipped with a clean end, you're going to insert the tip of the wire into this liner guide. Keep tension on that wire. Now, insert the cut end of the MIG wire into the liner guide, which is protruding to the left of the drive wheel. Once the MIG wire has been inserted into the liner guide, Keep pushing until you see the MIG wire over the tension wheel. Use the finger of your free hand to guide the wire into the brass liner guide that is opposite of the liner guide. So the wire comes from the spool into the liner guide, across the drive wheel, and into the liner guide that goes into the MIG gun. Make sure that you push the wire a good couple inches into that MIG gun guide. Once you feel that you have enough of it inside, drop down the tension wheel and bring up the tension knob. You can adjust your tension here at the tension knob, and if you need to change out your type of wire, then you can also use this knob here to change out your drive wheel, which you'll see has a couple of different grooves. Okay, so with the MIG wire loaded into the tension roller, now we're going to feed it through to the gun. So close your door, and you want to take the gun and you want to remove this shielding cup and place that off to the side, and then remove the welding tip and place that off to the side. Now we're going to go to the back of the machine and turn on the machine. With the machine on and looking at the front display panel, you're going to see the wire feed button, which is right here. You want to push this wire feed button and you're going to hear the wire roll through the machine. This is going to feed the wire through the liner, inside and out the gun tip. When it reaches the end of the gun tip, you can release the button. Now go ahead and turn off your machine. So now you're going to want to take your welding tip and put over the wire. Now make sure that your welding tip is the right size for the right wire. We're using 035, so I'm going to use the 035 welding tip. Slide that over the end and thread that into your welding gun. Then take your shielding cup, slide that over the wire, and thread that onto the gun. Now you want to cut off the excess wire, leaving about 1/4 inch past the shielding cup. Let's talk about the controls on the front of the machine. The select button allows you to choose between amperage, material thickness, voltage, and inductance. Once you've made your selection, you can use the adjusting knob to adjust up or down your chosen selection. I'll talk about what each of these selections mean in just a bit. The 2T and 4T button allows you to choose between how you want to weld. 2T allows you to pull the trigger and weld, release the trigger, and stop welding. The 4T setting allows you to pull the trigger and weld, release the trigger, continues to weld until the trigger is pulled a second time. This is useful if you have much longer welds. Then you have the weld type button. This allows you to select what type of gas you are using and the type of welding you are doing. As mentioned earlier in the video, you can use CO2 for MIG welding, which is the setting MIG CO2, or you can use a CO2 argon mix, which is shown on the machine as MAG. You can also switch to stick welding. You can switch to lift up TIG, and this welding unit can also be set to gasless, which means you can use the machine without shielding gas. However, you will need to use a flux core welding wire. The next button allows you to select the MIG wire size you are using. You can choose between 0.023, 0.030, or 0.035 wire sizes. To the right of the wire selection, you'll see a button labeled gas. This allows you to test the gas flow and check your regulator. This is a great way to adjust your regulator setting while you test the gas. I typically set my gas between 15 CFH and 20 CFH. And the last button is the wire feed button, which you should have already used when setting up the MIG wire. Now let's go over the amperage, voltage, material thickness, and inductance settings in more detail. By default, the welding unit is set to run on amperage. When you make any adjustment, you adjust the amperage, the voltage automatically adjusts. If you want to adjust your settings based on material thickness, press the selector button until the indicator light is next to the material thickness icon. Because this welding unit works on the metric system, your material thickness will be shown in millimeters. If you want more control over the voltage, use the selector button to cycle through to the voltage indicator and use the adjusting knob to increase or decrease your voltage. You can adjust in increments of +1, +2, all the way up to 10, or decrease -1, -2, all the way down to -10. The last setting is inductance. If I'm welding a butt joint, I'll leave the inductance at the default, which is 0. If I do an inside corner, I'll turn up the inductance to about +4 or +5. If I'm doing an outside corner, I'll turn down the inductance to -4 or -5. The 205DS also eliminates the need to adjust your wire speed. By default, your wire speed is adjusted based on your amperage settings. That about wraps up the settings on the 205DS. Okay, one last thing before I turn you loose so you can go weld. I'm going to show you how to change out the drive wheel so that if you want to change the wire size, you can make that adjustment. So remove the knob that holds the drive wheel in place, and then simply get your fingers into and onto the drive wheel, and now you can remove this. You'll notice that stamped into the drive wheel is 0.8, and on the other side is 0.9. You have two different sizes on this particular drive wheel. In your packet, when you got this unit, you have one more wheel that will also have a 0.6 groove into your drive wheel. Make sure that the wire size that you desire is facing the back of the machine, and line up your key on the axle of the drive. Make sure you push that into place. Replace the knob. Tighten that down. Lower the tension wheel, replace the tension knob, and now you've changed out the drive wheel. Before you start welding, check out this chart. This is going to help you dial in the amperage needed based on the material thickness you're using and the wire size.
So I hope that setup helped you get your MIG-205DS ready to go. Now, get out there, start welding, create some fun stuff. We'll see you in the next video.